I can't really think of much of a preamble for this, so let's get to it. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. I've been looking forward to this one for a while, partly because I did like the first Doctor Strange movie, partly because I usually like Sam Raimi, and also I was kind of hoping that they'd go bonkers with the multiverse concept. I was also nervous because I have said in the past that I am actually not a big fan of multiverses. I don't like them in general. I feel they very easily become a crutch for some very lazy and trite writing, especially within comic books. That having been said, this does a very good job of evoking what is fun about multiverses while avoiding most of the stuff that at least grates on me and actually finding a way to head off some potential things down the line that are part of the reason I've been worried about multiverses in general. I don't want to overpraise this. I'm actually, if I'm being completely honest, still sorting out how I feel about certain aspects of it. So I can't. I am going to talk spoilers in a little bit, but I want to try and give people a general sense of my opinion before I do that. But like, my main thing that I'm torn on, it's enough of a it's a spoiler insofar as like the marketing didn't really lean on this notion very much that like I kind of have to table it. Here's what I'll say. There's an element to this movie that I don't know if it actually bothers me in a vacuum or if it's just really bad timing, because it leans into a trope and a pattern that I've actually been thinking about for a little while, because I'm planning to eventually do a video sort of breaking it down, my issues with it. And it's something that's been on my mind, and this leaning into that may not be the movie's fault, may just be bad timing. But I think it still might have bugged me anyways a little bit. But I'm going to have to save that for spoilers. The acting is decent. This is not an acting showcase for the most part. People are having fun in their characters. And Sam Raimi is clearly having an absolute blast. I have no doubt that plenty of people are making comparisons to The Evil Dead because it does have that Raimi energy. I would actually say the much better comparison is Drag Me to Hell. Not only because that was the last full-length horror film that Raimi did. It was actually the last of his films that I've seen, because I haven't seen really much of his TV stuff that he's done since then or anything like that. But the other thing about Drag Me to Hell is Drag Me to Hell was where Sam Raimi learned just how horrific you can manage to be within the framework of a PG-13 movie. Because dang, some of this stuff is doing legit horror. Not start to finish, not the whole movie, but definitely parts of it. Ooh, he's not holding, well, he is holding back. It's not an R rating, but he's only holding back insofar as you're not seeing blood splattered everywhere, but like in terms of the energy of it, oh yeah, that's pure Raimi horror in quite a few places. And I do like that energy. I actually kind of liked the more, anxiety-inducing vibe that the guy, Derrickson? I forget his first name, who directed the first movie, also brought to that. But Sam Raimi does it a lot more, and it's a lot of fun. America Chavez as a character is fine. She doesn't have a ton of personality, but also because of where she fits in the story, she doesn't really have all that much time to develop one. She does have a couple of decent beats, and she has good enough chemistry with Steven. So, yeah, she works. She's not a big standout, but then again, nobody's really a massive standout acting-wise. Although there's a character who I kind of wish would have been, but again, we'll table that for the moment. And I do wish it went bonkers more frequently than it does. There are a handful of parts that are legitimately the kind of nutso ideas that I'm like, yeah. And I just wish there had been a bit more of that and a little bit less, just it's our world, but it's half falling apart, or, it's our world with a couple of different, bits of technology sitting around. Not that it dwelled too much in those things, but like those feel just very, meh. And there are times that the characters literally just rush through a far more visually interesting universe to end up in a less interesting one. I suppose the other thing that I could talk about, at least a little bit, that isn't spoilery, is this. This leans on the events of WandaVision a bit more than I was expecting to, because this is actually now, this kind of sets the expectations for exactly how much the films are going to rely on a knowledge of the series on Disney Plus. Now, my expectation has been they were going to rely on that very little, because however much Marvel, the MCU, Disney wants to integrate these things, they have to know that not as many people watch these series as go to these movies. They have to know that. So I always expected it to be pretty unintrusive, and it's relatively unintrusive. Here's what I'll say. If you've seen WandaVision, you're going to be completely caught up on a bunch of stuff that's here. If you haven't, it's not impossible to follow. It does cover the main beats that you need to be aware of, but you're probably going to be left wondering, wait, how did we get here? Well, there's a series for how we got here. But in a way, that's actually kind of what evokes the feeling of reading a comic book. Because in comics, frequently, if you're not reading everything put out by a company like Marvel, you'll pick up an issue, as whether it be a part of a team up or a crossover, or just a character will appear, and you're like, wait a minute, they're referencing like their status quo seems totally different from last time I saw them. I guess if I really want to find out, I got to go check out those other comics. But for now, I guess I get enough to move forward. So that's actually a pretty direct translation of the experience of reading a comic book. Whether you consider that a selling point or a detriment, depending on your feeling of reading comic books, that's up to you. But I'm a little bit kinder to it with that in mind. Overall, like, I enjoyed it. I had fun. I think I would have enjoyed it more had fewer of some of the more interesting places it goes had not been hinted at or revealed in trailers. There's still a good amount of surprises in this. Don't get me wrong there, but they showed more than they needed to. And overall, I enjoyed it. I have a feeling it's going to end up high mid for me, and maybe even drop that just down to mid. Like, I had fun. It's going to take time to determine whether or not it sticks with me. But I got to talk spoilers. So that was your spoiler-free stuff. We got to talk spoilers. You've had your warning. Spoilers, blah, 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 blah. Here we go. I'm really torn about Wanda. So this thing, Wanda is the villain. Flat out. Not like anti-hero, not like leaning villain, not like becomes the villain. I mean, from the start of the movie, she is the villain, which even those of us who have been following the making of this thing, where it got revealed, I don't know if it was probably revealed, but like definitely hinted at and indicated very early on in production that Wanda was going to be a villainous force. The marketing did not paint her flat out as the villain. It painted her maybe as conflicted, maybe as someone who'll be a problem a little bit later, but like, nope, right from the start, she is the villain of the movie. And I don't love it, because the entire thing is motivated on she's trying to find her kids, who she lost in WandaVision. I'm not going to go over the logistics of that if you don't already know, but she's trying to find her boys in another dimension. And so I mentioned that there's a trope that's been on my mind lately, because I'm thinking I will definitely at some point, maybe even sooner now, do a video on it, which is trauma leading to villainy. Because it's a common thing not only in movies and television, but it's super common in comics, and unfortunately has a lot of precedent with Wanda in specific. And I'm sure some comic book people will be like, well, like, there is precedent for the kinds of stuff she does in here in the comics. Like, I don't care. I don't really care. The MCU is not beholden to exactly what happened in the comics, either with storylines or with specific characters. So that's not a reason to do this in and of itself. And there's just such a lack of nuance to it. Because, like, I kept thinking of, like, little ways that would make it go down better for me. Because at the beginning, we find out she's basically been sending monsters to try and get America, because America has the dimension hopping ability. When we first find out, it could have been a case of, she's sending monsters, which means she doesn't have to go in there and get her hands dirty. She doesn't have to think about the damage being done. She can just sort of detach herself from that. Look, I sent this creature. It's going to do it. How's it going to do it? I don't need to know. It's plausible deniability. And then, later on, when she, launches the assault on whatever the hell it's called, where the all the mystics are, I got a little bit of, like, the sense of, I don't want to be doing this, but I will anyway from her, except it didn't last long. And then pretty much after that, she was in full villain mode. It's all too premeditated. It's all too thought out. And she is shot incredibly effectively as a horror movie villain. And visually, holy crap, does it work. She's deeply unsettling. Both the way Raimi shoots her and the way she performs really, really nail this. I just wish that this could have been a descent for her into villainy instead of she's just doing, like, I kind of wish we could have started from she's already doing bad things for, keep the motivation the same. She's already doing bad things, but it escalates, and, like, there's some effect on her character, because, like, technically it escalates insofar as the body counts keep racking up. But in terms of her characterization, basically nothing changes after she just lays into all the mystics flat out. She's in full villain mode at that point, and she's in it for most of the rest of the movie. And the lack of nuance in that for a character who has been a hero, and who, as much as I have my issues with WandaVision, that had a much more nuanced and interesting perspective on the effects of grief and loss than this does. This is just, she's a villain now. And an effective villain. But it kind of annoys me on principle. I suppose the other big thing to talk about is the whole thing with the Illuminati, which I really wish they had not dropped in the trailers. I really wish they had, because I could have really gotten into that scene if I hadn't already known. And, like, granted, technically, I only knew for certain 2 people who were going to be there. One, Professor Xavier. Really cool touch that they, like, did a quick little sting of the freaking 90s cartoon theme when he showed up. And, like, his wheelchair is modeled after that. That's kind of a nice touch. I did like that. But, like, him and Captain Carter, who'd been hinted at, granted, they're the only 2 I knew for certain, but because I already knew them, I knew what the possibilities were. And I didn't get the sense of delight that I think I might have otherwise, seeing Ansem Mount as Black Bolt again, seeing John Krasinski as Reed Richards, which has been a fan casting for freaking ages. And they know that. That's why they did it. And, this version of Captain Marvel, this altered form of Mordo, and it's fine. Again, if I was more inherently inclined towards multiverse stuff, but this is part of what I don't like about multiverse, because when you get into really out there ideas, like when you start messing with space and time and dimensions that are just operating on completely different principles, you have my attention. But when the multiverse is just, it's the same as the main universe, but X, Y, and Z are different. Why did I say Z? That's like a European and a UK thing. Whatever. I don't know why that came out of my mouth, but like that the parallel universe version of a multiverse bores me. I don't find it inherently interesting. So whatever pop I was going to get from that would have come from it being more of a surprise than it is. But the more bonkers moments that I really love are things like when Steven is fighting this other version of himself, which is not technically the evil Doctor Strange from What If, but like I also feel like What If kind of primed audiences for this. Same with Captain Carter, even though this is not the same Captain Carter so far as I can tell. I guess maybe she might be. I'm not assuming that she is. But when they fight and they start battling with the music notes. Oh, I loved that. I love that so much because it was ridiculous in the best way. Or later on, when Steven goes after Wanda by kind of possessing across dimensions his own alternate reality corpse, which is completely looking Evil Dead zombified, and then effectively makes a cloak out of the spirits of the damned. Oh, I loved that. And that stuff was what I wanted more of. That level of inventiveness. Because the thing is, I think here's the thing. With things like the Illuminati, like here's just different heroes who exist in this universe. That stuff I could have thought of. I would not have thought to do the music battle. I would not have thought to give a zombified Steven a cloak of the damned. That's the stuff I want out of a multiverse. That is the stuff that could be exciting about multiverses, but it almost never is for me because it's so rarely that kind of stuff. And even this, technically, didn't really need a multiverse to do those things. Well, the zombie thing, maybe a little just because of how the justification works, but like, these are ideas that could have been explored without needing the multiverse. So I'm just left going, did we need a multiverse? That said, the multiverse doesn't wreck anything. And I actually kind of mentioned they kind of put a button on something that I normally worry about, which they bring up the idea of incursions, which is that somebody from a different universe spending too much time in a universe that isn't theirs inherently causes problems and is destabilizing and disrupting. America seems to be the exception of that since there aren't alternate versions of her. But by establishing that, it prevents, at least for the time being, until they inevitably find a way to circumvent this. But for the time being, it prevents just pulling in alternate versions or characters that haven't been established yet from other universes, which was the main reason I didn't want a multiverse in the first place. I didn't want the Fantastic Four just being pulled in from another reality. I didn't want the X-Men just being pulled in from another reality into the one that we know. But now they kind of can't, not unless making it a major plot point that they have to address. And I like that because it means they can't just start casually overusing the multiverse in the way that I've been dreading. And that's a relief, to be completely honest. So I'm sure if I were to sit down and think about it, or if I'd taken notes, there are other little things I could talk about or other moments here and there. The stuff with Christine and Steven was fine. It was pretty bog standard. And the acting is decent. But I think the best thing about this is Raimi. Raimi's direction is what elevates this. The visualization and the presentation of these ideas and how out there some of the ideas are in terms of how they're shown and shot and framed, all this feels very Raimi. The script is serviceable. The performances are good enough. The effects, well, they pass. They're not all great. Honestly, the third eye effect looks kind of terrible, if I'm being honest, but whatever. But overall, I enjoyed it. I don't think it's going to stick with me that well. But whatever your thoughts were on it, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon's how I pay the bills. It's what enables me to do this as my living. I mean, any amount you're able to give me is a big help. Even if you can't, though. Like, share, subscribe is free, and that helps me out. But don't worry too much about it. Take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can come on back next time you need a break. Hey, end credits time, which means I need to shout out some patrons. This time I'm going to be shouting out Robin Moore, Zubin Litfala, Tarak, Oliver B., Melinda Walters, Imudelki, Leo the Boy, TT, Fernobulax the Poodle, Zach Paul, Eidolon, Tracy Scrabbit, Vincent Paul Bartolucci, Angry Kasparov, Toku BL Hoovian, Adam RDL Taylor, Shane Ross, Shayla Gourlay, and Brendan LaRose. You want to hear me mispronounce your name? Check out rewards on the Patreon. Thanks for all your support.